Today on the Take On Board podcast, I'm speaking with Ngaire Anderson about the AICD, that's the Australian Institute of Company Directors Board Mastery Program. So, folks, this is part of a 7-part mini-series. Well, it's 7 parts at the moment. Let's see what happens. We will talk about this, the Board Mastery Program. There'll be an episode about the Company Directors course. There'll be an episode about the Institute of Community Directors course, the ICDA course. An episode about Governing for Purpose, run by Small Giants. One about the Governance Institute of Australia program. The Governance for Social Impact program. There's so much professional development out there. It's fantastic. And we'll do an episode all about some New Zealand options as well, just in case for our Australian listeners you feel like crossing the ditch, or anybody else feels like getting over to New Zealand and doing some of those. So, before we start today, as always, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we record. For me, I am on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. I also pay my respects to any First Nations people who may be listening today. I acknowledge their continuing connection to land, waters, skies, culture and country. As I know you've heard me say before, I support Voice, Treaty and Truth for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and I encourage others in the Take On Board community to do the same. Now, let me tell you about this awesome person, Ngaire. Ngaire is on the board of IPC Health, where she's the Deputy Chair and Chair of the Clinical Governance and Clinical Risk Committee. She's formerly been on the boards of HeathCote Health, Bendigo Community Health and Remembrance Park, Central Victoria. Following 16 years as a paramedic, Ngaire has worked in non-executive, executive and leadership roles predominantly in the health and community sectors. A graduate of the AICD Company Directors course and, as we will hear more about today, having recently undertaken the AICD's Board Mastery course, Ngaire has held a variety of non-executive director roles across government and not-for-profit sectors. Welcome to the Take On Board podcast, Ngaire.
Thank you so much for having me, Helia. Really happy to be here.
It is awesome to have you here, and I can't believe it's taken us this long to sort this out to get you on the podcast.
Made it.
But I'm so glad we have, and I'm really looking forward to digging into the Board Mastery program. However, as always, before we do that, I want to dig just a little bit deeper about you. Okay. Can you tell me, where were your parents born, and do you know where your ancestors are from?
Well, my parents were both born in Melbourne. It's not a very eventful story. Both born in Melbourne and grew up in the northeastern suburbs around Eltham. But my ancestors on both sides mostly smatter across Scotland and England, with a little sprinkle of New Zealand as well. Yeah.
Okay. Well, hang on. So your parents grew up in Eltham. Did you grow up around there as well, or just your parents?
Yes. So I was also born in Melbourne, and my older brother and younger sister, along with my parents, lived in Hurstbridge in, again, the northeastern suburbs until I was about 7, after which we moved to Heathcote in central Victoria, winemaker country. Years prior, my father had planted vineyards and my parents decided to go all in on building a winery. My father is a self-taught winemaker. So yeah, from the age of 7, we then became country folk.
Amazing. Yeah. So, Ngaire, I can't believe we haven't crossed paths on this before. I grew up in Diamond Creek.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
Yes. So all of
Melbourne,
this is very familiar to me. So again, I promise we'll get back to the topic in a minute, but just because you grew up out there, so you grew up in Hurstbridge. So did you go to school in Hurstbridge?
I did. I went to the local primary school in the kinder. It was a great spot. A lot more space when I was growing up. Now it's really filled out. Feels like another suburb of Melbourne, really, in some respects now.
Definitely.
But it wasn't when I was growing up. We felt like we were in the bush.
Excellent. So, in fact, I think I know this too, but I'm going to ask the names of the traditional owners and the first peoples where you grew up. Do you know that way?
I can talk to Heathcote. So Heathcote is part of the Greater Bendigo municipality. So I live in Bendigo at the moment. And that municipality acknowledges the Dja Dja Wurrung and the Turungarung peoples. But specific to Heathcote's primarily within the Tarongarum country. So the Tarongarum people are the traditional owners who lived on that country for more than 1,000 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And how many languages do you speak?
Well, I like to think that I'm fluent in English. Might depend on the day. I certainly gave German a good crack. I lived there when I was 19, but having said that, I'm fairly certain my language skills reduced to ordering beer and wondering where the toilet was, or asking where the toilet was. But by my late 20s, I'd travelled about 30 countries. So, learned a smattering here and there to get by, but mostly sign language, I would say. English. English is the only language that I speak fluently, yeah.
Okay. And finally, given you've lived in a couple of different places, where do you feel your place or your home is?
Yeah, I used to feel like, I still do. Anywhere I can feel like is my home. I think home is in some respects a mindset. But I do feel really peaceful and content in Bendigo. I'm lucky to live right next to a beautiful reserve. So although I'm really close to the city, I feel like I'm still out in the country. So I wake up with the birds chirping. Got an outside fireplace and we can hear the crickets and frogs at night. So I've got right into gardening, hosting family and friends regularly. So I feel very content and at home here. But having said that, yes, can make anywhere feel like home if I try. Yeah. Which I think is it's a learnt skill in some respects if you've moved around a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Oh, thank you. Thanks for letting us dig around a little bit in there. And it's always good to know a bit more about the full person that we've got sitting in front of us. So thank you. But now let's turn to the topic of the day. As I say, this is part of a mini-series about professional development options for board directors. There are so many options. And today's conversation is about the Board Mastery Program, which is run by the Australian Institute of Company Directors. I think it's a relatively new program. So where should we start this, Ngaire? Where's the best place to start the conversation about this program?
Probably, I guess, the purpose of the program. I'm happy to chat about the structure of the program.
Perfect.
Yeah. Would you like me to start there?
I would love you to start there.
All right. So the Boardroom Mastery course is a 3-day course, essentially. You're brought together with, I think it was 20 directors, but you are split into 2 groups when you arrive, and you really only spend time with your own group through the process of the course itself. But it is a course that's in many ways very different from the AICD Company Directors course, which is one of the prerequisites, and I can talk about those in a minute too if you like. But the purpose of the course goes beyond directorship knowledge and skill, which is really a focus of the AICD Company Directors course, into the area of self and board dynamics. The learnings that you come away with are designed around knowing yourself, so enhancing your own self-awareness, also enhancing your awareness of the boardroom itself, so those power dynamics that might be at play, influence and how that's playing out in the boardroom, dysfunctional behaviours, those types of things. And also there is a bit of building knowledge around good meeting practices, including issues that relate to, in the case of certainly when I went, listed companies. So when you are there, you are part of a simulation. You are thrown into an environment where, as a board, a new board, in our case, we came together, we had some pre-reading, quite a bit of pre-reading actually, about the company that we were there to be directors of. And then we were thrown into an orientation process, which also involved board meetings themselves, subcommittee meetings, and a smattering of crises thrown in, as you would expect. So I think the beauty of what this course is designed to do is it's not about understanding the content in detail. It's about understanding what's going on, sure, drawing on your director knowledge that you already have to navigate what's going on with this company and with these crises, but in a way where you don't know these other people in this room. It brings up behaviours for yourself and for others, thinking patterns for yourself and for others, and it's navigating that more than anything that I really enjoyed and find fascinating. So the course itself, I can chat about the couple of the prerequisites, for example.
Right.
So there's sort of two streams of prerequisites. So you need to have, one stream is you need to have completed the company director's course and have a minimum of 3 years experience as a director, and experience on multiple boards, or a minimum of 5 years experience and experience on multiple boards. So you don't need the company director's course as a prerequisite for that. It's an online application process, and I think 20 people might be selected every 6 months. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of the crux of the course and how it differs from the AICD course. So it's all about really mastering self first.
So in that process, it sounds like it's almost like a simulation and
Exactly, yeah.
you get to be a fly on the wall for yourself and for others.
Yeah.
So for you, what were and it sounds like it's activities based as opposed to, chalk and talk PowerPoint based. But for you, what were the activities maybe that had the most meaning and impact for you, or the most learning?
That's really hard to say. Probably, again, the thing that drew me to this course primarily was the structure actually involves psychometric testing before you go in.
So good. Tell us about that. What was the tool? How did it work?
Yes, so each of the directors participating in the course received psychometric profiling, I should say, which involved undertaking a series of online tests. They look at things like personality, what they call leadership derailers, so they're behaviours that are innate to our leadership style that aren't right or wrong, but can derail our effectiveness under pressure. So how do we show up under pressure, essentially? The results of this profiling was presented to each director in a confidential report, which you didn't have to share with anyone. But that organisational psychologist met with you in like a coaching style conversation to unpack in detail your report. The same organisational psychologist was present and participated and facilitated some meetings throughout the mock 3 days as well. So they got to observe you and how you showed up throughout the course, which I thought is a brilliant, a really brilliant way to structure this. They also meet with you after the 3 days and provide feedback again around, and obviously want to hear from you as well, to unpack what you learnt and what does that mean in the context of what we know about ourselves, having gone through this process, both intellectually but also from a practice perspective. So the other part of the program that was brilliant and really touches on the feedback element, and that's, I should probably cache, I've always had a real curiosity about people and what motivates them, what makes a good team and a culture. So I look for opportunities like this, not infrequently, to challenge myself and keep growing. And like yourself, Helia, as a coach, I'm an executive and leadership coach, and I work with the exceptional Jack Phillips, who I know you've had on your program. And so growing your own self-awareness is a key part of coaching. So how other people experience and perceive us, which gives us choice. So one of the best way to do that is to seek feedback. So I saw this as a really great place to put myself in the discomfort zone, which is of course where you do your growing. So one of the feedback elements of the program involves group debriefing. So you're not only hearing from the org psych that you've unpacked things about yourself with, but after each meeting, so the 3 days is structured through, it has a proper structure as if you are being onboarded into this new board. There are many meetings and we are all responsible for chairing those meetings. And so what would often happen is there would be a group debriefing after a board meeting had been run, and the group would unpack as a whole how effectively they performed in that meeting. And the person chairing would also receive specific feedback from everybody individually around the table in front of everybody about how they performed, the strengths and the areas that their fellow directors thought were up for improvement. So you need to be willing to put yourself in that situation and really embrace the feedback to get the most out of this type of course. Not everybody will, and that's okay, but it attracts, I think, a certain type of person who's hungry to better themselves in some way or another, and is therefore open to hearing how others perceive and experience them. So essentially boardroom dynamics is what we're talking about, but in a really it's the next level learning, I guess, for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, how interesting! Because it sounds like it's both sides of the coin in terms of self-awareness. So you need to be open to self-learning, but also open to giving feedback on
That's
others.
right. Yeah.
Which often people find even harder than their own self-awareness. How did that part play out in practice, either for you or for others?
So I guess I wasn't challenged by giving feedback. I think the challenge of giving feedback is how you deliver it. And I think the intent was set by everybody, and certainly the facilitators, that this is a safe environment to give feedback. This is why we're here, and we need to acknowledge, as you say, Helia, that it is difficult to give feedback sometimes, but it is a gift. So if someone's willing to give it, then that's to be embraced in and of itself. Whether you agree with it or decide to take it on board is a completely different matter. But people are making themselves vulnerable, giving feedback, as much as it's difficult or can be feel vulnerable receiving it. So I personally wasn't challenged by that, but had to think about the way I was framing the feedback, because you also don't know these people. You've just been brought together as a smattering of individuals, suddenly giving each other feedback. So some people did struggle a little bit. Probably what I struggled with was if I wasn't clear on what my feedback was, or if I only had positive feedback, maybe that didn't feel like I was serving them enough if I couldn't find something to say that was constructive. So there was that element too. But I think, not to overthink it is probably the key. And just to be honest, if you don't have constructive or positive feedback in that regard, then that's the way it is.
Yes. Yeah. It's true. Yeah, it's true. I think the people doing this program are probably more open. They're doing it to get that feedback, which is a gift, as you say.
However, I should probably say I have heard stories that it doesn't necessarily always go smoothly. My particular group, I think, was very good with feedback, the way it was given and the way it was taken. And not everybody felt comfortable, that's for sure. But the intent was there and it was understood. But I have heard that, people do come to the program and maybe with the intent to start with, but then the reality feels very different, and perhaps that's when some behaviours can surface in different ways.
Yes, interesting.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm interested, just you talked about the profile before, the psychometric profile, and the debrief. Does that happen prior to the program, or is it within the program? So
the psychometric profile and the coaching debrief, which I think from memory went for about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, with the org psych, happens before you show up and meet anybody else. So you come into the program already with a new understanding, perhaps some insights that you didn't have before. It's not to be read as black and white. So the profile is not saying this is who you are. It's saying these are some tendencies that are showing up for you. Let's discuss them and work out how they actually fit with you and what you see as fitting or otherwise. And then that's what can be used as a foundation for yourself, and also for the touch points you might have with that org psych throughout the 3 days. And then you again meet afterwards for about the same length of time individually again with the org psych. Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, you'd love it.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Well, should I say this on air? I'm not sure. I'm going to. So I got halfway through applying for the program, and to be honest, got caught up in the administration of the application form, because the AICD required me to put a signature on it, and my printer wasn't working. And I'm like, can you just take this by email? And they're like, no, we can't. And honestly, I then just gave up. I will get back to it at some stage, but I just went, oh.
Have a holiday first.
Yeah, that's right. It's all too hard if you're just asking me to print a piece of paper and then send it back to you.
I think it'd be right up your alley, though. It's your bag, this stuff. You'd love it.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what stories you can share about your own practice, or the impact on your practice, or how some of this stuff played out. Yeah, how it played out in practice for you.
Yeah, so I'm happy to share. So I guess the main part of the program is to know yourself. So we all receive feedback. I'm happy to share some feedback that I received and
thank you for being vulnerable with me and the community. No one's listening, Ngaire. It's just you and I.
It's just you and me. That's right. Who else is going to hear this? So we do tend to have individual preferences in the way we think and behave, particularly under pressure, and none of it's right or wrong. We're all very different. We know that. We're all different. For me, I tend to have an autonomous thinking style. So I have dyslexia, which wasn't diagnosed till I was 17. So I got through school very much with a style of taking the information around me, making sense of it internally, really thinking about it before I then came out to the world with anything that made sense. So this style was likely a workaround for me as a child or in my childhood, and to some extent I've mastered the style by undertaking, rightly or stupidly or otherwise, a PhD in psychology, where it's important to, of course, consider the evidence at hand before you draw any conclusions. So I've been excellent at honing in this style of thinking. It was certainly something that I leaned into as a paramedic. So autonomous decision making, particularly when working solo, was critical in performing under pressure. So it's something I do very naturally, and what I've learnt is when there is pressure around me, that's the place I go. I go inward and I start to analyse and think about everything I'm hearing and seeing and otherwise, and then I make a decision or form a view. So what I found really interesting as part of the course constructive feedback for me at one point was that people said they would have liked to have heard more from me at certain times, because I wasn't necessarily the loudest or the most talkative. There was sometimes a perception that I lacked confidence. And why this is interesting is because I don't lack confidence. And this was confirmed to me by the org psych. And again, I also sense-checked and had a bit of a chuckle with my own board chair about it, because that's also not the perception that she has. But that was really interesting. So my natural style, particularly at times when the content is new, and in this case we were dealing with a listed company we just learned about, overlaid by multiple crises essentially. So my first instinct is to gather, internalise, analyse the information before speaking or forming opinions. So as opposed to more familiar environments like my current board, which is not-for-profit community health or healthcare in general, where it's just much more natural for me to understand that environment and therefore sort of jump more straight into the governance thinking and decision making. So by the time I might have had a question to ask or something to say, because I personally don't have experience on a listed board, and most of the people in my group didn't. Only a couple did. So it was a very new environment for us, which was part of the challenge, and that was obviously intentional, and it was also part of the learning, which was really enjoyable. But by the time I might have had a question to ask, after I'd done my due diligence thinking internally, somebody else had inevitably jumped in with a similar question. And in these instances, there's no point labouring a point that's already been made. However, awareness is key, right? So this was really great feedback for me, because the perception about confidence, as we know, is linked to perceptions of competence. Likewise, particularly during times of crises or when there's important decisions to be made, rightly or wrongly, boards can sometimes lean more on those who appear certain in their views. So confidence can also link to our ability as individual directors to influence and shape strategic direction in that way. So if I were in a similar scenario again, because I did put some thought into this, okay, so most of the boards I've sat on have been comfortable for me in the content. I this was the beauty of this program. It thrust me into a place where I went into a place where I felt like I needed to be the subject matter expert because I didn't know enough, in my view, about listed boards, and then you're laying on these crises. So I really got stuck in that moment sometimes in my head too much. So if I were in a similar situation, I'd first now have the awareness of my pattern to go inward, so I can then focus on getting off the dance floor. Mind you, I've been told I'm pretty good at doing the worm, but off the dance floor onto the balcony, so I have more of a bigger picture view of what's going on, and just pull myself out of that detail. Timing, I've come to learn, is also important for me in that type of situation. So I could couple that with coming in earlier to be inquisitive and asking questions, so that I'm finding answers that are actually available to me from the group, and then I'm not having to come up with myself in my head. And therefore I'm contributing more to shaping the conversations and value adding in the eyes of my fellow directors. So that was one of the experiences that I had in the program.
Interesting. I'm smiling a little bit wryly, Ngaire, because I was on a board I was on a couple of years ago. We did a 360, and some of my feedback was very similar about that. And what I learned, it sounds like it's a little similar to you, was I had to jump in earlier.
Yes.
Possibly because both you and I are coaches. I'm a good listener, and I would listen and then jump in if needed. I was definitely not the person that would just say what was on my mind for the sake of it if somebody else had said it already.
What's the point of that?
Interesting.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Helia, that you've had a similar experience. You're right. I hadn't thought about the coaching element, that you are also trained to listen and really observe.
Yes.
But it's the perception of others, right, and how that can really shape your effectiveness in that place.
Exactly.
Time and place.
Anyway, so that. Yeah. Oh, I love it. Okay. So that was part of your self-reflection. I think, what about, because you'd said it was about self-reflection and about observing the group as a whole. Is there any stories around the group dynamics that you can share that
the group dynamics, I probably... I can share another example of when I chaired a meeting, which can touch on what I learnt from that experience as well, and what the group learnt from that experience. Because there were so many meetings chaired, it's hard to remember all of them, and there were similar patterns that were coming up actually repeatedly. But the first day, I chaired a risk introductory meeting, so I was thrown into that. We were all sort of thrown in, but I was first off the rank. So not a board subcommittee meeting per se. So it wasn't there was no decision-making authority in the meeting. The purpose was to provide an overview of risk as a whole for the organisation as part of our onboarding as a new board at this retreat. So there are a number of challenges with this scenario for me. The first one, it was about an hour or so into the first day where we'd only just met each other. So none of us knew each other, or the content, or the organisation. There'd been an emerging crisis that morning, which was front of mind for the directors, and the meeting that I was chairing was interrupted by emerging news that kept coming in. So some directors felt that particular meeting wasn't as important as discussing and making decisions about the urgent issues, despite the fact we had a board subcommittee meeting. I think it was scheduled later that day for risk, which would discuss and deal with those issues. The conversation became a bit sidetracked. So, for example, some directors had a style involving regularly interrupting other people speaking, and taking up a lot of airtime. So the meeting, I think, ran smoothly initially. However, I started to straddle between giving leeway to certain situations and behaviours like the sidetracking conversations by nature of it being a course environment. So I hadn't quite got my head around the fact that it was a simulation, but we needed to treat it as a real board meeting. And noting we'd only just met each other, so we're still working each other out and each other's styles out. Who are these other people in the room? So I was straddling that and versus asserting more strongly as if the situation were real. And in hindsight, that's probably what I should have done. So a reflection for me as chairing that meeting was that when conversations were sidetracked by others, I kept bringing the conversation back to the meeting purpose, but I could have better utilised others in the room for solutions. So what we discussed as a board after my meeting and also after some others throughout, so again, these repeated themes that might crop up, was that a board is a team and it's okay to put it back on others to seek clarity. So I was also grappling with the new details coming to light for the board as a whole whilst trying to put myself in the governance mindset of chairing that meeting. So things that I could have done perhaps differently would be to acknowledge the topics being raised were not on the agenda and asking the group if I needed to change something. So rather than taking it all on board as the chair and grappling with this side-tracking conversation and these urgent issues, right, this is the agenda we've got. Is this the right agenda then? Is there something we need to change because I'm hearing X, Y, Z? And in doing so, or ask the person who's made a comment with no practical solution tied to it, what they recommend the group does now as a result of their comment. Or asking the group how comfortable they are with a particular suggestion to move forward in a particular way. So being prepared to be flexible, but not having to have all of the answers as chair in those moments. Also, these things could be discussed, perhaps deferred to an outside meeting. So acknowledging that these things are happening, but the intent of this meeting is X, Y, Z. Let's get through it and then let's deal with that next thing. So I guess in that moment, I kept bringing it back to the agenda as you would expect a chair to do, but the sidetracking kept happening, and then I kept taking that on board myself instead of going, righto, what do we want to do here?
What's going on here?
Yeah. And the group had a key reflection as well in this session that I chaired, and their reflection was that many directors in the room noticed some derailing behaviours of others which kept sidetracking the meeting but didn't action or voice their concerns, and in doing so did not support me as chair. So one of the things that came out was that really there was a lack of team support for me in my role as chair. The responsibilities of individual directors in supporting the chair were really discussed as our ability to influence individually to move forward the board as a team. So not relying on the chair to pick those things up and manage all of the to's and fro's, behaviours or otherwise, to actually come forward as a voice with the intent of moving us as a group towards where we need to be. But that requires doing things tactfully as well. But it also requires being willing to speak up. And in that session, which was, again, it was our first session as a group, so people are probably thinking similarly to me, should I say something? I don't know these people. So that was a really interesting sort of thrown into the deep end experience, but also led me to have a conversation with my own board chair around how she perceives the support of the directors on our board and how me as an individual director may or may not be able to better support her in her role. So that was also a nice little wrap up of bringing it back to my own work.
Amazing. Oh, Ngaire, this has been such a great conversation to give us such a good flavour of the program.
Yeah,
loved
wonderful.
It. What are the key things you want people to take away from the conversation that we've had today?
I think the key things are definitely the importance of knowing yourself. So how you think, how you act under pressure, whether it's doing this course, whether it's, this sounds self-serving, whether it's having a coach, whether it is simply asking your peers for feedback, but understanding ourselves and our blind spots as well is really important, because just like my first example. You know, I'm a confident person, but interestingly, the perception of others at times was that I wasn't. And how does that impact my effectiveness in the role that I'm undertaking? So it's never black and white, and I think each scenario might be different and have different shades of grey, but if you're open to continually just being aware of how you show up, how you're thinking, and awareness of others, and how that comes together in a nice little neat pie or otherwise, and then how you, with your own skills, can move that pie to where it needs to go or where you think it needs to go. That's key, I think, because you can have a whole boardroom of very competent directors in their own right who come together very poorly in decision making and board culture. So, great board decisions are not made by individual directors, they're made by a group. And so understanding group dynamics is key. So that would be the first thing. I think recruit the brains trust. Don't go it alone, particularly when chairing. That's something that I think is really important. Draw on the board, have conversations with individual directors to better understand things if they're in a position of knowing. But regardless, recruit that group. But that requires also a level of maturity around group dynamics. And when it plays out well, it plays out beautifully. So our group, despite all of our different personalities, different ways of working, sidetracking that went on throughout the whole thing. I might have contributed to some of that at points, I don't know as well, but what happened by the end of it was brilliant. By the end of our third day, we literally sat around the table and said, geez, we'd love to be a board together, because we delve so into understanding each other and the way we work, the way we think, but importantly with the intent of wanting to leverage people's skills, leverage their personality traits in certain scenarios, if it's presenting to the media or whatever it might be. But we ended up really humming in the end. It was a norming, forming, storming type scenario, but by the end of it, it was just a piece of magic how we came together. And I think, that was a beautiful thing for us to experience in our particular group. And also check your biases and raise concerns if you see perhaps something that's not playing out the way you think it should. So an example might be, we had a lawyer on our group who people were asking him for legal advice. Board members were asking him for legal advice on particular operational matters where he wasn't there in that capacity. And same with some finance experts around the table, where there was probably a little bit too much reliance on specific directors' viewpoints. And so just being aware of where the information is coming from that is informing those group decisions.
Oh, amazing.
That's probably my takeaways.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. And as I say, it really gives a beautiful flavour of the program if people are considering what they want in terms of professional development. If you're after knowing yourself, if you're after knowing the group dynamics, then this might be a program that you'll get some value from.
Yeah.
We will make sure we put a link, obviously, to the program in the show notes, but I'm wondering if there's any other resource you would like to share with the Take On Board community.
I listen to a lot of podcasts, so I wouldn't say that this is this resource it's a podcast. It's the Diary of a CEO by entrepreneur and investor Stephen Bartlett. Love listening to his stuff. It's not governance specific, but more recently I heard one of his episodes on AI agents, emergency debate. So I guess we're all boards are sort of faced with this AI influx. So it touches on some areas that are probably of interest to boards around ethically harnessing AI's power, skills that matter most in the future, and shifts in workforce profiles. I know probably a lot of boards are talking about that, what that means for their organisations, disruption with jobs, but also creation of new jobs, so it's not all doomsday. But that's probably one. But if anything, I think Diary of a CEO is just a great podcast, so I'll give him a plug.
Fantastic. Oh, Nari, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom about this program with the Take On Board community. I know the Take On Board community values personal growth, values professional development and improving their practice as a director, which is exactly why we're doing this mini-series. So thank you so much for being part of it and sharing your experience today.
Thank you so much for having me, Helia. I feel very privileged to have been invited on and have really enjoyed our chat today.